Cornelius Vanderbilt has been described as an illiterate brute with a short temper, who was hated and feared by most people he met. And yet, in spite of this, he was also one of the wealthiest men in history. An incredibly shrewd and cunning businessman, he reportedly had more money than was held in the entire US Treasury at the time. Before Rockefeller, before Henry Ford, there was Cornelius, dubbed the original robber baron, the term for industrialists who have amassed giant fortunes through extremely ruthless business practices. And it's hard to deny his story is one of the greatest rags to riches stories out there. His ancestors came to America as servants. That was his starting point. He didn't have any wealthy family or a prestigious background. He was just surrounded by people who worked for other people. But Cornelius decided that was going to end with him. At just 11 years old, he dropped out of school and went to work on his father's ferry in New York Harbor, transporting goods across the river. After learning the trade, Cornelius wanted to start his own business doing the exact same thing, which meant he needed a boat. But he had no money. Fortunately, his mother was a farmer and she was able to save up $100 and loan that to him. And so with just enough to buy a small sailboat, he made the purchase and began transferring freight and passengers between Staten Island and Manhattan. At the time, plenty of competition was doing the exact same thing. But Vanderbilt had a strategy here. Undercut everyone, offer the cheapest fares on the water and take their customers. Every penny that Vanderbilt made went back into another ship, and then another, and then another. This is the blueprint he followed, where you live small and reinvest everything, and you repeat this until the math becomes undeniable. This is exactly the same system that Jeff Bezos used to build Amazon the same way. Because Cornelius worked so relentlessly, it wasn't a long time before he had a whole fleet to himself. People started calling him the Commodore. Then the War of 1812 hit and the government handed him a contract to support soldiers. His operation was already too big to ignore. Somehow, despite all of this and being incredibly busy, at 19 years old he found the time to get married to his cousin and went on to have 13 children. Although he wouldn't find the time to actually be a good husband or father. There are many reports of him neglecting his family entirely and having a deeply unhappy home life. At one point, he even had his wife briefly committed to an insane asylum, and years later, he committed one of his sons as well, simply because the boy was having epileptic fits, which Cornelius saw as a weakness. Back on the business side of things, trade was booming, and by the late 1820s, Cornelius had identified his next great move: steamboats. The technology was more efficient than anything he had been using before, so he went all in, and he invested using the exact same tactics as before: undercut every competitor, offer lower rates, and take all of their customers. At one point, he was offering boat trips for free, deliberately losing money on every single trip, because his logic here was cold and simple. As long as he had more funds than his competitors, he could bankrupt them by starving them of customers. Then, once they were gone, he could raise the prices back up. And that's exactly what happened. Several competitors went under, and the others simply sold themselves at a discount to Cornelius because they couldn't compete anymore. Further highlight just how dominant he was in this area, one of his competitors, the Steamboat Association on the Hudson River, actually paid him $100,000 just to stop operating in their territory. For them, it was cheaper to pay Cornelius than to keep fighting him. As time went on, every payout made him larger. Every competitor he absorbed made him stronger. To Cornelius, making money wasn't just business, it was a game, and he was determined to win. But even as his wealth grew, he was always considered an outsider by the elite. He couldn't write properly, he didn't speak or carry himself like the upper class, and so he decided to lean into that. He advertised his ships as the People's Line, an affordable transport for ordinary people. He turned the very thing that the elites mocked him for into his entire brand. Then in 1849, Cornelius identified his next huge opportunity: the California Gold Rush. Now, you've likely heard that the people who got richest during the gold rush weren't the ones digging for gold, but it was actually the ones selling the pickaxes. However, the ones who actually grew the richest at this time were those who were moving the people to the location. After gold was discovered, hundreds of thousands of people flooded toward California, the largest mass migration in American history. California had no rail connection yet, however. The only way was by boat. Cornelius saw this immediately and started offering trips. But where he separated himself was this: while everyone else was using the route through Panama, Cornelius found a shorter route through Nicaragua, over 600 miles shorter. By 1853, Cornelius had been working non-stop since he was a kid. He was approaching the age of 60, and for the first time in life, he decided to take a vacation. He bought a giant yacht and then set off for Europe with his family. And the moment he stepped away, everything went wrong. Because you see, he left the management of his Nicaragua business to two partners named Morgan and Garrison. While he was gone, they decided to betray him and cut a secret deal with the new Nicaraguan president, a man named William Walker, who'd forcibly taken power and handed Cornelius's exclusive operating rights over to themselves. When Cornelius found out, he wrote them one of the most ominous letters in business history. "Gentlemen, you have undertaken to cheat me. I won't sue you, for the law is too slow. I will ruin you. Yours truly, Cornelius Vanderbilt." And then he did exactly that. He launched a competing company, created a shipping blockade of the entire country, convinced neighboring governments to refuse recognition of Walker's dream, and eventually helped start a war that completely overthrew the government of Nicaragua. Every single person who crossed him was destroyed. By this point, Cornelius was nearly 60, and in his mind, he was just getting started. Cornelius had always been looking forward ahead. Now he could see that more and more freight was moving by train, not by boat. So he did what he always did. He identified where the world was going and got there first. He started selling off his entire fleet of ships and investing in railroads instead. At the time, rail lines were completely fragmented, dozens of independently owned routes with no coordination. Cornelius started connecting them, building a unified network, consolidating the whole system into one empire. So before long, he built the largest railroad in the world. Eventually, as time went on, he began giving money away. He founded Vanderbilt University with a $1 million gift, the largest charitable donation in American history at that time. By the age of 82, his fortune at the time was around $100 million, roughly $200 billion in today's money. By some estimates, he personally held about 1/9 of all the money in circulation in the United States. And yet, despite that, he lived modestly. Almost everything he earned went straight back into the business, also leaving over 90% of his fortune to his oldest son. The rest was split among his other children, most of whom he considered weak and undeserving. Cornelius Vanderbilt was a polarizing figure, hated by many, yet respected, even if grudgingly, by almost everyone. He shaped the American economy more than nearly any entrepreneur before him. He improved the transportation across an entire country, connected people and their goods across distances that seemed impossible. And he did it all starting from a $100 loan. The circumstances you're starting from right now, whatever they may be, are not the reason you won't build something. They're just the field you have to clear first.